Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. There are some benefits to going 1 to 3. There are some drawbacks to going 1 to 3 in this time slot. For the SEC baseball tournament back in May, it was awesome. LSU was playing right there in the morning, and we were like a de facto postgame show. It was great. I don't have to worry about, evening baseball and basketball games getting in the way of this show. We're early enough for that. I don't have to wake up at 4 in the morning to get ready for the show. That's a positive as well. But one of the drawbacks of this time slot is Brian Kelly's weekly press conference. And I'll tell you why. Not that you need to, cry for me here or anything, but it is an awkward spot for us because Brian Kelly comes on a little after noon, and then he wraps up about 20 minutes before we go on the air. So while I can give you a paraphrased version of an injury report, it's too quick for us to cut up the sound bites, and honestly too quick for him to say something and me to dive in and research something extensively and then bring it to you for the show. It's just an awkward deal. The morning guys, they don't have to deal with the Brian Kelly press conference on Monday. They just get to it on Tuesday. For Hanny and Jimmy, like they can react to the game in the weekend, and then Brian Kelly can go and they can kind of talk about it and get out of their show. And then Matt's got everything cut up at 3 o'clock to have for you ready to roll. And we don't necessarily have that. So sometimes I like to circle back to things that were said on Monday on Tuesday because they might be a little bit fresh or something that I want to look a little deeper into other than just 20 minutes before he says it and we've got to go on the air. All of that being said, I decided this morning when I was going on my run, I'm going to listen to that press conference again and see if something pops out that maybe we can talk about a little further. And it did, because as I listened to the first 10 minutes of his press conference, there were a few things that stood out to me about what he said. And it was very obvious, and this is 2 weeks in a row now, that Brian Kelly has come out and had a message he wanted to convey before questions started rolling. And this one was kind of on the nature of his teams, their start, and the challenges that they've got in getting their guys to play their best football. And before we get to the sound, I do want to suggest that it is evident to me that Brian Kelly's teams have gotten better as the years have gone on, as the year has gone on in his 2 years. Obviously, the LSU team that went to the swamp and rolled Florida, the LSU team that beat Alabama, those teams were significantly better than the one that played Florida State in the Superdome. I think LSU got better last year, specifically on offense. I don't know if they got a lot better on defense, but they did get better on offense as time went by. And it's realistic to expect LSU teams to do that under Brian Kelly. He's been a phenomenal coach, a winning coach everywhere he's ever been, and I don't expect that to change significantly at LSU. But he did talk about the challenges early in the season, and there were a couple of aspects of that I just kind of looked at and went, I don't know if I love that, and we'll talk about it.
When you have two first-year coordinators, they're learning their personnel, who they want to use, who are the best 11 in each situation, and then what schemes put us in the best position to succeed. And then now we'll have to go and prepare accordingly. And, I wish we could have done that in preseason camp, but we didn't know a lot about who were those best players for that situation. And it's becoming a lot clearer. I think we're a lot closer to finding those things out. And we continue to look for, getting better in those areas.
Okay, here we go. One overarching theme, first thing that comes to my mind hearing that soundbite is I'd really like you to figure that out in fall camp. I'd really like you to figure out what guys need to be out there, what guys can do, what their strength is, what the plan is. I'd like that to be evident by the time you get to the first game. Florida State, USC, I'd like that to be done. However, if we're going to expound on this a little bit more deeply, in this era of college football, it's never been more difficult to figure out what you've got because players have the freedom to come and go, and they do. And you've got a lot of freshmen coming in because Brian Kelly wants to build through freshmen, and it's hard to identify what they can do for you early in camp. You've got a lot of players that move on that you might have been counting on, and you've got a lot of transfers that come in, and you've got to evaluate them and get it ready. So there is a lot of turning over of your roster, and that does make things a little bit more difficult. Okay. And you talk about two new coordinators. Guess what? You're going to have new coordinators all the time. This is literally, I didn't even research this, literally off the top of my head. And I understand there are actual head coaching changes at some of these places. But look, A&M's got 2 new coordinators. Yep, they brought in a whole new staff. 2 new coordinators. Arkansas has got a new offensive coordinator. Auburn's got a new offensive coordinator. Alabama's got 2 new coordinators. Coordinators come and go. It's just the nature of the game. The era of Mickey Andrews coaching Bobby Bowden's defense for 15 years are over. The years of John Chavis coaching Phil Fulmer's defense for better than a decade are over. Coordinators either get fired or they move on to become head coaches far more often than not. Dabo Swinney had 2 coordinators for a really long time, and that's very rare, and they had a lot of success. And then those 2 guys left, and they hadn't been able to pick up the pieces. But more often than not, you've got to go change coordinators. Kirby Smart has had different offensive coordinators cycle in and out. Now, he handles a lot of that defense, but that's just the way it goes. And Brian Kelly's going to have coordinator turnover. I don't believe Blake Baker and Joe Sloan are going to be here for 6 years apiece. That's just very unlikely. They're young. They have bright football minds. They've been a lot of different places. And likely, if they do things the right way and things look really good at LSU for a couple of years, they're going to get an opportunity to be a head coach. So the new coordinators thing, like that's just part of it. You got spring, you got summer, you got camp, you got to get it going. And that's what I would prefer to happen. But if you can't do that, and it's very difficult to identify the guys that you need out on the field. And look, I'll give you concrete examples at LSU that changed immediately. Game 1, Florida State. Emory Jones is not playing right tackle. Florida State absolutely annihilates LSU to the point of attack. They make changes on the offensive line. They move Dellinger out of center, put Charles Turner in there, get Emory Jones in on the right side, and all of a sudden they start to mesh and they play better. Harold Perkins didn't play at all in that game. By the time you turned around and played Ole Miss a month later, he was the most impactful guy on your defense. Sometimes guys need a little bit of time. Caden Durham didn't get much run against USC. He got a little, but not a lot. Maybe you're in a better position a month into the season to use him more. There's no rule that says you have to play USC right out of the gate. There's no rule that says you have to play Florida State right out of the gate. There's a rule in the league that you've got to play a Power 5 team. But Rutgers has telephones, so does Purdue. You can call up Wake Forest. They may cancel on you like they did Ole Miss. But you don't have to play the big boys. And if you do, you don't have to play them right out of the chute. I'll give you 2 examples this year. Ohio State, here's what they do in September this year. Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, and Iowa. They don't play Oregon until October the 12th. Now, some of that's the conference. I understand Michigan State and Iowa. But you haven't been dealt the most difficult conference opponent right out of the chute the last couple of years. I don't know what South Carolina is yet, but Mississippi State was terrible last year. What's Ole Miss doing this year? Well, Georgia, they start with Furman, then Middle Tennessee, then Wake Forest, then Georgia Southern before they get Kentucky and South Carolina. Nobody's suggesting that Ole Miss can't make the playoff because their first 3 games aren't that difficult. If you're going to tell me that it's very difficult in this era in college football to understand the 11 guys you need to have out there, well, then let's make things a little bit more palatable on the front end. That's not against the rules. But Brian Kelly talked about in his first press conference down here that the alignment was great within LSU. How many times did he say alignment in his first press conference? A bajillion? At least 6 or 7. And he knew that this was coming, that these games were already on the books when he got here, and Clemson's involved the next 2 years, and that was too. And that's not going anywhere. But beyond that, you want to make a phone call up to Purdue? They'll come down here and play you, I'm sure. If they don't want to, go find Minnesota. I bristled a little bit at that, but the fact of the matter is I understand it's a difficult job to get a whole new team ready to go right out of the chute. Well, then don't do it. And LSU's attitude has always been, we're going to schedule the biggest and baddest. We're playing Virginia Tech home and home. We're playing Oregon in Dallas. We're going to play Wisconsin home and home. Give me USC. Give me Florida State. Give me Clemson. We'll play North Carolina. That's been the mantra of this team, of this football program. But it's punched you between the eyes the last 4 years. And if you want to tell me the answer is not cowering and going to play lesser teams, scheduling Southern Miss instead of Southern Cal, and the answer is to get better, well, I'm not going to disagree with that. I think LSU's roster needs to improve. And the fix may be getting a better roster as opposed to lightening the early part of the schedule. You're never going to lighten the schedule because you're always going to have to play 5 really good SEC teams. Really good. Maybe more. So the schedule's never going to be light, but you can lighten the schedule on the front end. But right now, you are what you are, and you put yourself in a big-time hole that was not mandated to you the last couple of years. And to hear Brian Kelly say that, I was just a little interested. Like, well, if you're going to have trouble with that, then go ahead and try to fix it. Now, Brian Kelly was asked kind of, okay, what do you think about that win? And he basically said they're not that far off from being exactly what they want to be. And Beck will play number 8 here. He's saying like he thinks they're pretty close.
Want to play cleaner? Yes. But at the end of the day, that was a good South Carolina football team. That was a good defense. We scored 36 points, and I think everybody watched the game. We didn't score inside the 5 twice. You just score those 2 touchdowns, which are, I think, an 87 or 88% chance of scoring touchdowns in that area. That's 50 points. So we're not that far off. And if we make the 2 plays that we should make, just, being fundamentally sound on the 2 run plays, we're going to give up less than 250 yards in total offense. So we're really close. And I'm not here to make you guys feel better. You guys are going to evaluate it and write the way you write it. But I know what we see, and I know how we feel about what we need to do.
I'm perfectly fine with him coaching the guys that way with positive reinforcement, saying, hey, guys, I know you might be discouraged about this or that, but look, if you make 4 plays, this whole thing's different. And that is close. 4 plays is close. But the fact of the matter is you've been giving up 60-yard touchdowns for 2 years, so you're not that close because it's been the same thing for 2 years. And the fact is that you hadn't been a good short yardage running team in 2 years, so you're not that close to that either. Those are just pieces of your football program at this point that have been so for 16 games. So hopefully that gets cleaned up and hopefully they get better. As I said at the front of the segment, I think that there is proof that Brian Kelly's teams do get better. And I'm okay with him coaching the players saying, hey, and as he said, he's not trying to make us feel better, and that's fine. Again, I don't care what you say in the press conference, just go fix it. But there's a fundamental thing you got to do differently. Maybe it's not necessarily giving yourself the most difficult game in the country in week 1. We'll see. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.